I'm Dr. Kimberly Manning.
And this is Dr. Ashley McMullen. And you're listening to the Human Doctor Podcast, where we explore the human side of medicine, along with teaching, living, learning, and all things in between. Using the power of storytelling, conversation, and connectedness.
Hey, we're two dope academic internal medicine doctors, but we ain't your doctors. So if you perceive anything we say here as medical advice, no, it ain't that. Also, the things we say, they only reflect our brilliant Black woman magic mind and not our employers.
You could have been anywhere, y'all, but you chose to be here with us, and we appreciate you. Let's go. How's Grady treating you these days?
Grady is where the fun is, man. It is an absolute privilege to work at Grady and to take care of patients on the service I'm on. I'm on a team that has a lot of patients living with some very unfortunate, irreversible diagnoses. And it is making me feel this sort of up and down of like intense gratitude that it's me and that I get to be the one there with the patients, intense sorrow, and then like feeling very mortal because, I'm at an age now where several patients are my age and have, diagnoses that are going to abbreviate their lives. And just watching people sort of go from a completely normal life to like just being sucker punched, it's a hard thing to watch, man. So
that's real.
Yeah, man. It ain't, it is not for slouches. This I'm on. But yeah, I'm grateful.
Yeah. In terms of maintaining gratitude, I've also been, working harder on being very present, especially when I'm outside. I like to run without headphones and just kind of being very aware of everything around me. And I don't know, it's just, I've been very much on this like fall vibe because the heat wave has finally kind of dissipated in the Bay and it's starting to cool down. And, there's a couple of deciduous trees in the park across from where I live, and their leaves are starting to change into this auburn color and starting to fall. So I'm here to just skip Halloween and just go straight into like November Thanksgiving cozy season.
I love the words that just fall out of your mouth as a part of everyday vocabulary. I'm trying to think how many years has it been since in like conversation I use the word deciduous. I'm gonna say 54 years. But I'm gonna be dead. I'm gonna drop that word on somebody this week. I'm gonna be like, the deciduous trees are beautiful, don't you think? I'm gonna watch and see if they try to Google it.
Yeah. I love that.
So I see that you and Mahalia are still holding strong with the braids with the ombre color on the end. Are you still enjoying that look?
Yes and no. I think I love the look. I definitely will say that. And it has been awesome to just get up, throw these braids together and roll up out of my house. But I think it's just been so long since I've run my fingers through my actual hair. And, it's also no joke, carrying an extra pound or two on the top of your head can exacerbate some neck pain that you didn't realize was there already.
For sure. For sure.
Probably another week or so.
Well, I have a couple of recommendations. I think in keeping with our conversation last week, you brought up Ta-Nehisi Coates and his book, The Message. He was on one of the most recent episodes of the Ezra Klein show. And I will say, first of all, upfront as a little bit of a trigger warning, that if you've ever heard Ta-Nehisi Coates speak or if you've read anything he said, he is very unapologetic about his insights and questioning things. He questions a lot of things. And I think for people, depending upon who they are and how they feel in particular about some things happening in the Middle East, it could be upsetting depending upon who you are. I think what I just actually found quite interesting is I love to listen to Ezra Klein interview people, smart people, because he's so smart. and is just sort of this respectful banter back and forth. You know, Ezra Klein is a white man who grew up in a Jewish home and is somebody who like will push back on a lot of things, but in this way that it just felt it was. I just learned a lot and I enjoyed listening to it.
Mhm.
Obviously, his show is an opinion show, so there's always going to be people's like opinions there, but I definitely think if you are a person who is willing to read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, that would be a good companion.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I found that conversation to be really, really respectful and necessary, to be able to bear witness to a respectful debate on issues, particularly issues as emotionally fraught as this. I thought it
Yeah.
was a really good episode as well.
The other thing I enjoyed was my sons this weekend. They were in the house at the same time. My younger son went to Tuskegee on Friday morning with a friend who was touring. He spent the day there with his brother, and his brother was coming home for the weekend anyway. So on Saturday morning, they jumped up and came on back. So, they were FaceTiming me from campus, and they just
Oh,
seemed really happy, and they're in a very good brotherly space. It was good. What about you?
I love that. I was just thinking back to the times that I went to visit my brother after he moved to Ripon, Wisconsin to play
Ooh,
basketball
ooh,
in the cold Midwest. But yeah, it's like a very formative transition point in the sibling
yeah,
relationship.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Can I say one other thing that happened to me that was levity, that was funny this week? First of all, in addition to me being a Black American, um, I'm a Black American that's all up in Black culture. So a lot of the things that are like new sayings and stuff like that, I just tend to know of them because I'm looking at things that make me know, right? So there is this expression, usually it's of a younger generation, but the expression is when you refer to somebody as playing in your face. Playing in your face is it can be said with levity or it can be said when you're angry. So for example, if I tell you that the top three historically Black colleges are Spelman College, Howard University, and Tuskegee University, if you went to Florida A&M, you might be like, see, y'all playing in my face, trying to leave FAMU off the list, something like that. That's funny. But sometimes people can be very angry and they can be like, you playing in my face, usually accompanied by some expletives. So I was in the hallway last week and a patient of mine who had been fairly calm, I overheard some commotion in the hallway and it was going back and forth and it was escalating, but it culminated. And what got me in the room was when I heard the patient say, you playing in my face. And that is when I knew that this had become serious and I needed to be there as the attending of record. And indeed, she was right. She was advocating for herself. And I will say we were indeed playing in her face with the things that we were doing. But it was just going to a place where it was like about to, she was very, very, very angry. And it was just funny because the two people at the bedside, they had no idea what she was talking about. And I was like, y'all, this is escalated somewhere. Like, we got to bring this down right now. So we ended up coming up with a good plan for the patient, but it became a teachable moment with one of my students. I was like, do you know what it means to play in somebody's face? Ma'am, I have no idea.
Oh man. Maybe we should, section a
Oh,
corner of our podcast to be Black Culture 101 just to make sure that everybody's up to
no.
speed.
Yeah, and it's just like we could fill a whole book with little terms like that.
Yes.
So we stopped playing in my patient's face, and my patient was able to be discharged happily.
I'm glad that you were there.
Well, well, well. Ladies, gentlemen, non-binary family, kings, queens, and non-binary royalty. Somebody told me they would be willing to buy a t-shirt that said kings, queens, and non-binary royalty.
Wow.
Anyway, I digress. I'm sitting here at Grady Hospital, and yes, last week I was wrong and mistakenly thought that I would be able to sit back, relax, and listen to the Ashley McMullen, Associate Professor of Medicine. We'll get back to that. Tell a story, but I was wrong. Today I am right. So I got on my cozy little vest. I'm about to put my hands in each pocket. I'm going to lean back in my chair and I'm just going to listen. So, sis, you have had a lot of time to sort this out. So, do tell me, what is the what?
You're right. You're right. The what on this beautiful fall day is lamentation.
Dang,
Mhm,
lamentation.
mhm.
That's right up there with deciduous trees, girl.
Yeah. I felt like I had to up my vocabulary game. Your whats have really been on point
Hey,
lately.
flexing
So
on them. Okay, lamentations. Yeah.
yeah, lamentation being kind of like a posture or like an outward expression of grief and sorrow. And I want to attempt to share some reflections, maybe two stories. The first story is actually one that's like very close to my heart. I don't know that I've shared this with you. I've shared parts of this for folks who've been rocking with us for, these last many seasons of this podcast have heard me tell stories of when I lost my grandmother in 2020 and what a profound experience that was, both in terms of how painful it was, but also kind of how beautiful and spiritual and awe-inspiring it was. One of the ways in which it was really profound and awe-inspiring was the conversations that we had with her in the days leading up to her stroke, which it would eventually prove fatal later on. So going back to 2020, this is in September, late September. I think it was actually on a Friday night. And it was the last time we had a meal with my grandmother. We were at her house, her and my grandfather's house in Houston. And she had just spent all evening like cooking this big meal for us. Just kind of out of nowhere. There was nothing really special. I was visiting at home that week. I'd already spent the day before with my grandmother and stayed the night at their house. And so this next evening, she decided to cook for us, and my mom was over. And then at one point, I kind of excused myself to go read in the living room, but I was still within earshot of the kitchen. And it was just my mom and my grandmother in the kitchen, and they were talking to each other. I had mentioned before in the podcast how my grandmother and I had been talking, and she'd been reflecting a lot on her childhood and just sharing stories that she had never really shared with anyone before.
Mm-hmm.
And then on this particular evening, for whatever reason, the conversation kind of turned to my great grandmother, which is my grandmother's mom. We call her Medea. And Medea had passed away in 2014, so 6 years prior to this. And, I've had the benefit, or I guess the privilege that not everybody has, of being able to grow up around my great grandparents. But the loss of Medea was also pretty profound in the sense that, she seemed like the type of woman who was going to live well into her hundreds. Like,
Wow.
was still kind of walking to church every day. She grew her own vegetables, like had her routine. And then, it was just kind of one morning, suddenly she was eating her hard boiled egg at breakfast and then keeled over and died. It was quick, it was sudden, and it was also exactly the way in which she would want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But it left a lot of grief on the table to be kind of processed suddenly. And I remember watching my grandmother struggling to process that grief.
Mm.
I remember that funeral very vividly because I was sitting right behind my grandma in the pew. And while a lot of, her siblings, even my grandfather, were, getting up there and sharing testimony and crying, she was just stoic the whole time.
Mm.
And I have to admit, like, her stoicism was something that I really found admirable. And like, I saw her and I just saw strength all the time. But when she was in the kitchen with my mom and she was talking about Medea and sharing parts of, herself and just how much she missed her, one of the things that she said that I'll never forget was, I wish I could cry. If only I could cry, I think I would be okay. And granted, like, this is between her and my mom, and I'm just hearing this. My mom and I would talk about this later, and she would say, like, it looked like she was about to, but then she just kind of like bottled it back in and then just kind of kept going. So moving from that particular experience, I'm now reflecting back exactly a year prior to that, when I was finishing up residency. Because for most of residency, I would say probably in 3 years, I think I cried once in the hospital.
Wow.
And, in a bathroom stall where nobody was looking for about 5 minutes. And then I pulled it together. And, I remember seeing, I mean, you see so much sad stuff, just like you were saying earlier, people kind of our age, even younger, going through this whiplash of facing mortality day in and day out. I'm pronouncing people dead, I'm running codes. It got to a point where it wasn't like even a conscious effort to squelch feelings. Like I just could not even access them.
Mm.
And it wasn't until after residency that I felt myself like really feeling things again, and then also giving myself permission to. And then there was one moment in particular that I'm going to pluck out of this, although I've had several of these types of experiences. The first couple months of my new job on faculty, I kind of have brought what I thought was kind of that same kind of stoicism and just kind of strategic planning and that kind of mindset into this job that, I'm going to this is how I'm going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a great mentor, who's still a great mentor, but at that time we were meeting pretty regularly. And she is an older Black woman who's been on faculty here for a long time and has done so much incredible work. She's just kind of a beacon for many of us, especially people of color at UCSF. But she's also someone who's just very big on mentorship. And so if you're going to be a mentee with her, you come with an agenda, you have a plan of what we're going to talk about. And, it's kind of formal, informal. And so, this week we had our usual meeting, and I remember I had been going through some stuff at that point. I was feeling a lot of just heavy emotions, but I was just I gotta be ready for this meeting. I remember walking into her office ready to kind of knock out some planning and sit down. And she looks at me, and her first question is, "How are you doing?" And for whatever reason, that question just opened the floodgates. That was all I needed. And I just started crying hard in front of her. And, up to this point, I could probably name on my hands the number of people that I've cried in front of, really cried. It always had made me uncomfortable. And so when I walked into that office, I was not planning to break down, but I did. And what she did in that moment was so important, because it was she wasn't fazed at all. Mm-hmm. She was just looking at me, and she said after a while, she's like, "I can handle your tears." It was so important because, number one, I looked up to, I still, more so at that point, I looked up to her so much. That is not how I wanted that meeting to go, but here we were, and she was meeting me right there. And then the other important piece was she wasn't immediately trying to inquire, what's wrong? Let's fix this. Tell me what's going on. It was simply, let me just hold the space with you for as long as you need it. And then, without even telling her everything that was going on, I was just expressing I'm feeling a lot of shame right now. And with that, she actually told me about a time where she felt really deep shame. And it was the type of honesty that I was really just did not expect. I don't remember anything that I had on my agenda. I don't think that we got to that. But what I do remember very vividly was what I felt walking out of that office, which was this sense of just extreme levity and relief. So not only the process of being able to lament, to outwardly express what I was feeling, but to have someone bear witness to it without trying to fix it or become uncomfortable with my sorrow. And then to even take it a step further and make me feel like I wasn't alone in what I was feeling. And so, yeah, I guess in telling that, number one, just recognizing there's a lot of what we do, especially in medicine, but also in our lived experiences that will make us believe that, it's a virtue to hold on to our emotions or to, you know, process things quickly and move on.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case. Not saying that you need to fall apart every time, but, you know, being honest about what you need. And then also like having people in your life who are willing to stand in that space with you. Amanda has done this for me a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
And she is really good about just being still with it. Like we'll just sit on the phone silently, like while I'm wailing. I feel an abundance of gratitude for being able to kind of arrive at this place.
Mm-hmm.
I cry a lot more readily now than I ever have in my life. And at the same time, you know, part of my lamentation currently is that I don't know that my grandmother had that. In fact, I know that she didn't. And I wonder what type of liberation she would have been able to feel had she experienced that while she was here.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Yeah. Generational differences and the times, even now, like looking at what my sons do compared to what my husband does,
Mm-hmm.
it's such a different space. Like, right, things just keep evolving and people do what they do because they were trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I think a person of your grandmother's generation or your mother's generation, um, there was just too much pain to like stop and be crying about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think about enslaved people and I hear stories of them singing and these things that they would be doing, and I'll just be like, how are you singing? But like I think that there had to just be a space to like push some of the pain and find a way to be able to process through it.
Mm-hmm.
And crying was just not a thing that could be like a reflexive thing that could
Yeah.
happen. And I don't necessarily think that's just limited to her generation. I mean, my husband is very much that way. I've been married to him for over 20 years now. I've seen him cry twice.
Mm.
And I mean, when I think about how much I cry, uh, I I just, you know, just find that to be a fascinating thing. But I think again, people do certain things because it helps them survive. For me, crying helps me survive.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have come to realize that, you know, grief is really like the soul just wanting somebody to, bear witness with you,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It looks a lot of ways. So for some people, that does look like crying.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, it could be having a space to just lean against the counter in the kitchen and tell your daughter, like, man, I wish I could cry.
Mm.
Because in a way, that was a cry,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe it would have made her feel better to actually weep, but maybe she would have discovered that that isn't what was needed for her.
Yeah.
There's no way to know. I remember this song. Do you remember like, no, you're younger than me.
Don't do this.
Try not to. Okay. There was this book that was called Free to Be You and Me that I grew up on. The book had all kinds of poems in it and songs. And it was this song in the book called It's All Right to Cry.
Mm.
And I don't remember all the words, but I knew it all as a kid. But the guy who sang it was Rosie Greer. I think he was a big, like, enormous football player. I might have his last name wrong. It was Rosie something. I think Greer. But he was singing the song, and he's like this big dude, and he was like, "It's all right to cry. Crying gets the sad out of you. It's all right to cry. It might make you feel better. Raindrops from your eyes, washing all the mad out of you. It's all right to cry. It might make you feel better.
Mm.
Sad and grumpy, down and dumpy, smugly ugly, mean and ugly, hoppy, happy, or sloppy, slappy, hoppy, happy. Change and change and change." I could have it wrong, but I heard that when I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and it resonated with me so much. And
Mm.
he describes how crying takes you from feeling really sad and then elevates you because you've kind of purged what you feel. And the dichotomy of this hyper masculine, like defensive lineman singing this song with his scratchy, deep voice, saying it's okay to cry. I just thought it was powerful.
That's brilliant.
Since you love books, you should like check out Free to Be You and Me. I think I got it from my kids. It's a little classic.
Man, I see Christmas presents loading for all 7 of my nieces and nephews.
Yep. Free to Be You and Me. That was the jam.
I love it. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening and sharing that reflection as well. I think that's this aspect of like, sometimes the pain is too much, that to even like let it out a little bit can feel overwhelming. And I think that it's absolutely true for my grandmother, for Medea, for all of that generation. And so, yeah, I think that even her being able to express that desire was a really big deal.
Yeah, she had a safe place to put that, which is really amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I think there's something to be said about that.
For sure.
I'm grateful to be in a generation and to be alive in a time such as this where that it's kind of normalized to feel and to emote transparently. And I guess it depends on who you hang out with and who you're with and everything. But it is great to have a space to grieve however that looks for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's awesome to have the people who can be with you in that space without needing to change it.
Yeah, or fix it or try to revise it into something else. Let it be what it's going to be.
Yep. As you've done for me more than once.
And it has everybody on this podcast has done for me, because I have probably cried 750 times on it. My poor little stoic husband yesterday called me on the way home from work. How was your day? And I was like, I'm very sad. It's like, woo. I went from telling him I was going to pick up the dog from daycare to I'm very sad. And he just held the phone and he was like, I know she's getting ready to download this whole thing. So and I did. But it's all right to cry, man.
It's all right to cry.
It's all right to cry. It might make you feel better.
Well, I know you've got some students who are waiting to hear your wise teaching, and you don't want to be playing in their faces.
I don't want to be playing in their faces. True that. Well, sis, I love you dearly. It has been a pleasure as always. And until we meet again.
Until we meet again. Love you too, sis. That wraps up this week's episode of the Human Doctor Podcast.
Special thanks to our favorite brother gastroenterologist, Dr. Chuma Obiname, for the beats. Shout out to the Dr. Ashley McMullen for editing and production.
Mad love to our podcast family at The Nocturnist and the Clinical Problem Solvers, our Med Twitter fam.
And especially shout out to all of you, our listeners.
Until next week, remember,
we see you and you are enough. Holla!